Joining now on this very special day, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren. Ambassador, first, tell us what this day means to you and the people of Israel.
Well, I'm loving it. Good, Liz. Thank you for having me on. It's going to be very emotional for me. We can't look at these pictures without being overwhelmed with emotion, with joy for these families, recognition of the suffering that they have endured, that so many, thousands of Israelis have endured who have fought in this war, suffered and sacrificed in this war, that our supporters throughout the world have stood by us through immense, almost incalculable opposition. And as you mentioned, as Trey mentioned, that there are still 24 families of deceased hostages that were murdered by Hamas that have not been restored to their family, reunited with their families, and their suffering continues. We have to be aware of that. Having said all that, it's a moment of just extraordinary hope. And I must say this as someone who's been involved in Middle East diplomacy now for many decades, as an historian of Middle East diplomacy. I have really experienced or have researched a moment like this. I think President Trump is absolutely right. This is an extraordinary moment.
Absolutely.
Where everything is possible. Everything is possible. You could have peace between Israel and Syria, Israel and Lebanon. Yes, even peace between Israel and Iran. He's absolutely right. You shouldn't smile. It all depends, as I think Trey said, on the next stage, whether we can disarm Hamas.
Well, exactly. That leads to the phase two, which is they've got to lay down their arms. And President Trump said while he was in Egypt just a few hours ago regarding the Gaza deal, reconstruction requires demilitarization. Do you think Hamas is going to do this? It really feels like even Muslim countries who in the past supported them, and I'm speaking about Qatar particularly, they're done with this nihilistic group, which really has just destroyed so much in the region.
And that's one of the big contributions of the Trump administration and his team of Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. For the last so many years, everyone's saying the way to end the war is by pressuring Israel. Let's cut off arms to Israel. Let's suspend munition supplies to Israel. No one ever came up with the brilliant idea, hey, let's pressure Hamas, until the president and this team. And that has worked because even the Qataris, even the Turks, the major backers of Hamas, understand that this organization brought untold destruction and instability to the Middle East. And what begins in Gaza doesn't end with Gaza. It spreads to the streets of Cairo and Riyadh and even Doha. And they've had it. And they want to put an end to it. Yep. So while Israel is unlikely to renew the fighting, it'll be very difficult to renew the fighting, there are tools at the administration's best that can be used to pressure Hamas. They can cut off arms. They can cut off money. They can cut off Hamas's ability to steal humanitarian aid because they steal most of that aid and make a lot of money on it. We can starve them out. And Hamas at the end will have to give up. They'll be given a choice, a very generous choice. They can surrender or they can die.
There's a very important point to be made, and you brought up a key name, and that is Steve Witkoff. It really feels like President Trump did something that nobody else has done in the past, and that was basically throwing out the old playbook of using career diplomats who were working off a different, older model that in the past has failed, and basically said, I'm putting this guy, a Florida real estate guy, in charge, handing him the keys to a war-torn region that for centuries has been in turmoil. And here's what he said in front of the Knesset today about Steve Witkoff.
He was a great businessman, but I know a lot of great businessmen, to be honest with you. He had tremendous negotiating skills, but I know a lot of people that negotiate pretty well, although it is an art. But there are people that can negotiate pretty well. But most importantly with Steve, he's just a great guy. Everybody loved him. Everybody. I mean, I know some negotiators that are so good, but you wouldn't have had peace in the Middle East. It would be in World War III right now with some of these guys. Everybody loves Steve, and they respect him, and they somehow can relate to him.
Steve Witkoff, even the president said he didn't know what he was doing. He's never been a diplomat before. Is this sort of the new way of diplomacy in the world with people like Steve Witkoff and his nephew and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, also a real estate guy?
It's amazing. These three real estate moguls, in many ways, succeeded where generations of statesmen, soldiers, diplomats failed. And why is that? Because they threw, as you said, Liz, they threw out the playbook. And what did that playbook said? Playbook said, well, you can never make peace between Israel and Arab countries before there's a creation of a Palestinian state. Wrong. The way to end the war in Gaza is by pressuring Israel and not Hamas. Wrong. The way to get Hamas to succumb is to somehow hold back the Israeli army and not let it go into Rafah or to Gaza City. Wrong. And by the way, you're never going to get the hostages all released. You can only get some of them released in return for limited ceasefires. Wrong. They threw all of that out and approached it in a negotiating way. And I'll tell you differently. Also, President Trump, in contrast to some of his predecessors in the Oval Office, proved to the people in the Middle East that he's willing to project power and use military power. And in the Middle East, power is respected. It's the strong horse. And President Trump used it against the Houthis in Yemen, later against Iran with great effect. And also, Mr. Trump, Mr. Witkoff, and Jared Kushner all understand that diplomacy is like negotiating real estate. It's 90% personal relations. And they had personal relations with every single leader in the Middle East, and particularly close relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. He wasn't pressured. He didn't have to be pressured. It was an open door. And they put all this together, and that mounted to this truly historic moment, the success.
The 20th point in the 20-point plan is the discussion of a two-state solution. Egypt's President Abdel el-Sisi said today Palestinians have the right to live in an independent state side by side with Israel. A two-state solution is the only way to consolidate peace. 2,000 Palestinian prisoners were released in exchange for the 20 live hostages and 28 dead hostages. I mean, the numbers are obviously completely skewed. What does that say? And also, to that end, 250 of the 2,000 Palestinian prisoners were lifers. They were sentenced to life in prison for all kinds of horrors, including the lynching of an Israeli soldier back in the year 2000, where the one who did that, I believe his name was Saleh, he drenched his hands in the blood of one of them and held them up in a frenzy and waved them as if to say, isn't this so great, to a cheering crowd. He's being released. Does that poison the well back in Gaza as they try to rebuild?
Well, many, many questions there, Liz. I should just tell you that I was present in the Army near that lynching, and for a while the Army thought that I was one of the victims. So it's very, very personal for me. And it's personal for the families of all the victims of these murderers. It is excruciatingly painful, and we have to remember that, too. There's a tremendous price to be paid for this historic moment. The two-state solution, people have been trying it now for about 60 years. It hasn't worked. And one of the major reasons it hasn't worked is the Palestinians hold the world record for people who has rejected a two-state solution, going back not 60 years, but going back to the 1930s. So why people seem to think it's going to work this time where it hasn't worked in the past is a mystery to me. There are other ways that we can move forward, creative ways, and I think the president was intimating that. He says we can look at other ways we can move forward with the Palestinians. And yes, the Palestinians do deserve a future which is free of conflict, which gives their children and grandchildren the opportunities which Israeli children also deserve, which is freedom for certainly from violence, from war, and the ability to realize their abilities in the freest possible way. All of that the Palestinians deserve. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a state framework, and that state could easily fall to Hamas, as Gaza did. When it was given to the Palestinians back in 2005, could fall to Hamas in a matter of days. So we have to be very, very careful here. But certainly we should discuss the possibility of all sorts of remedies for the Palestinian question. And point 20 does not call for the creation of a Palestinian state. It calls for discussions on the pathway. And a pathway could be a thing with gravel. It could be a thing with flowers.
Michael, once again, on the screen, we are waiting for the convoy of coffins of the 28 remains of the hostages who didn't make it. And this is a nation, I think it's fair to say the entire nation has a sacred bond in Israel. They all stand together. They go and they fight for a common effort, like what happened right after October 7th. They're drenched in grief no matter what, even with the joyousness of the reunions. Is there a way over that and in the future?
There always is. We are a people of immense resilience. Remember, this is a state, the state of Israel, that was created only 3 years, almost to the date after the end of the Holocaust, in which one of every 3 Jews in the world were murdered. If a people can turn around and do that and make a state in the middle of the desert that's surrounded by enemies and soon to be invaded, with no natural resources and no allies, we can overcome this. We have overcome wars in the past, and I'm very confident about our future. We've had an entire generation that has fought. It's our greatest generation.
Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you. A long and amazing day, really.
Amazing day. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.